we put it out there. What questions do you want answered? And we got a massive amount of responses. And so today we're going to take on one of those questions, and it was related to intergenerational communication, communicating one generation to the next, particularly as it relates to adult children and parents. So instead of just having the parent be here and dictate terms, we have our panel today, and they're all at different levels of communicating with their parents. And so I'll let them introduce themselves and kind of say where they are in terms of dealing with their parents, and then we'll just go from there. Freestyle.
All right, hello, I am Morgan LaRoyce. I lost my mother at 25, so I don't have that relationship with my mom as an adult, so that's something interesting. I do miss being able to communicate with her as an adult because I was pretty young, like 25. An adult, but not quite, super, super old. And then my father, who just turned 80 in August of last year, and so just, communicating with him as we are transitioning to new phases of life.
Right.
I'm Donalyn. I am raising my mom and dad right now. My Gen X mom and my boomer dad. Love them dearly, but things are changing as I'm coming to and from school constantly. And then, just kind of like in the life transition of now being an adult and cultivating what new relationship looks like and what those terms are. So, yeah.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jennifer. Similar boat to Donalyn, I'm also 23, and I do have a Gen X mom, baby boomer dad. But I also have a twin sister, and I think in terms of my relationship with communicating with my parents, it does vary depending on different situations. I've definitely noticed different trends and changes as I've gotten older, as well as going to college and coming back completely, stepping more into my womanhood and realizing more of what I want, my desires, and who I am. So yeah, it's been interesting to navigate those waters.
Okay. Start off talking about what you think is the greatest challenges relative to that.
Do you want me to go first? Okay. I think for me, it's the amount of freedom that I want now, or to just explore and just get to see what's out in the world. I know that we were babies once and we were just little kids that needed guidance, and I want my parents to understand that it's okay to let loose a little bit, and that just have confidence in the way that you raised me, raised us, me and my siblings, that we'll make the decisions to the best of our ability. But should we need help, you'll still be there to support us and guide us, but not to restrict me in that way. And it's really just being able to, explore different hobbies, different, for example, in terms of what my career is going to look like. I think that's the main thing that we do have points of contention. I went to school pre-med, came out. We're still navigating what that's going to look like. But we just
we haven't seen post-med yet.
We have not, no.
I'm assuming mom and dad kind of struggle is around.
Absolutely.
She's a survivor.
3 is before post.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
right. We're still waiting for the last part to come into play. I've always loved art, and growing up, acting, music, singing, dancing, I still continue to do those. But I told myself that after going through STEM for 13, 15 years of schooling, coming out, finishing, getting my degree in biology, so we still have that. But
Big Ivy.
Thank you. I did want to come out and explore those passions, to be able to nurture my creative side. And that's been what's going to pay you when you actually need to support yourself. And I do understand that is very important. But at the same time, I want to be happy. I want to be able to do something that I can see myself in long term and not be, for lack of a better word, miserable, even though it does seem kind of harsh. I have seen people in jobs that don't necessarily fulfill them, and I'd rather not be paid less, but I'd like to, be paid well and be happy at the same time, where that compromise can be found. So yeah, it's been a little bit of a difficult one. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of mine is also related to individuating as well, because I think as a teen, I didn't do a lot of the work of being my own person, I would say. And so now that I've kind of been my own person, traveled to a degree, seen different parts of myself. I think that it's finding kind of who I am and watering my garden in terms of, like you said, nourishing all of those passions, but then also understanding the larger garden that you exist inside of. And so as you're nourishing self and trying to like get close to God and things like that, how do you also not become, I guess, selfish in that? And then also see and perceive everybody else, especially going from context of being by yourself 2,000 miles away and then being
Right.
back. And so I think a lot of it is that individuating and the rub of like, I'm my own person, but then I also exist in larger context. And so doing the community and also doing the personal work that it takes at the same time.
Okay. Morgan, how do you, I mean, at this point, you're kind of at the other end of that. Now you're having conversations about, Dad, we need to do this. How has that reverse been for you?
It's been pretty interesting just in terms of, you know, my upbringing. My parents were not together when I grew up, and so they were always friends. We had a good relationship with my dad, but I never lived with him. And I didn't really know a lot about his life or what was going on in his life at that time. And I didn't really realize it. I'm just, you know, a kid growing up, living my life because they had a good relationship. It was fine. I never felt trauma or anything crazy. It was just like, oh, hey, Dad, you're over here on Christmas. Good to see you. I'm over here doing whatever. Or, you know, what do you want for your birthday? Or whatever it was. You know, like my dad at my track meet or something like that. But that was it. So on this side, it really came to a head when he had like some major surgeries. I didn't know that he was going to have a surgery. He ended up having a surgery, and then there was something that happened, and there was an emergency, and I got called. And he lives in a different state than me now, so where I grew up. So I, you know, had to go back there, and that was kind of the beginning of what I would say the iteration of our relationship is now. Okay. And that is like I was fully immersed in all of his business. So now I know everything because I had to get there and like care for you. So I mean, and honestly, it was a great turning point. It was surprising for me, like how much I did not know, and now that I do know. And then I also kind of was always concerned about, and I think I still have a little bit about that, like how much he will let me in, because I wasn't. But I have found, I've been very blessed, God has been so good that it hasn't been as hard as I thought. And so just kind of now it's just like, what are the things that you want, and how can I help you with this is where we are. Because he is a single man, and he's,
Right.
you know, it's just him, and it's just me, and so we're just kind of navigating that. So just kind of navigating, like, you're an adult who has lived a life fully. I cannot tell you what to do, even though I feel like you need to do these certain things because of health, because of this, because of that. You still have everything that you believe and think and want to do.
Right.
And how do I honor that as your daughter,
Yeah.
but still help out as much as I can? Is kind of like where I am.
Okay. The thing I find fascinating is what's common is the driver is the same. So what you're describing, the driver of the parents is your best interest. So I'm looking at this, and yeah, I'm seeing your desire to explore and all these kinds of things, but I'm also up the road, and I'm looking back and I'm saying, okay, there's some markers you need to hit to live a comfortable life. Where it's maybe more career and financial, now we're talking health, but it's still the same driver. There's some markers, Dad, I need you to hit. Blood pressure needs to be this. You need to be getting out. You need to be what can't be eating all that. I get that you want some snacks and stuff, but you need to bring that in. It doesn't matter kind of where you are, but when you're accountable and you're looking at and you're serving, there's a heart that sounds the same. So you're now sounding basically like a parent would talking to their adult child. Look, yeah, I get grown man. I get you need to have some experience of individuality and all this other kind of stuff. But there need to be some bumper rails. You can't just be, yeah, you're a grown man. You can drink. Can't drink like that. Grown man. You can eat, but you can't eat like that. Grown woman. You can explore. You can do all this other kind of stuff. However, that thing needs to be reined in because the caregiver's view is the same. It doesn't matter when you have it. The caregiver's view is the same. you will, when you have your own children, no doubt, reference your exploration as a standard for where you put the walls and what you see. Talk about the concept of renegotiation, because, and I'm hearing it as a parent, so I'll just cop to that up front. When I hear as a parent some of the things that you all are saying, and I guarantee you a number of the parents hearing and listening are hearing and saying to themselves, the first thing that pops into your mind is, that level of individuality comes with full funding in terms of your life. That's just a parental response, like, yeah, all this freedom and it's in my wallet. Yeah, I'd like the freedom to explore some stuff too. But why I say talk about the renegotiation, because like you said, I'm a child, I'm an adult, I went off, I lived on my own, now I'm back. Okay, I left, I came back, you're supposed to see me different, but where's the renegotiation, because I might be different with you being gone. And there's some things I want to do, but I'm still in a way supporting your exploration. So how do you see the notion of how do we then renegotiate our relationship, because this is a different relationship altogether. Neither one of us will be able to dictate terms. That is really the adult reality of it.
Yeah.
So talk about that aspect of it.
I'd actually love to hear from Jennifer on this, because for having been yours, for being your daughter, dialogue is always going to be my bias. And I think that I have the luxury of dialogue in ways that I notice young people around me don't have with their parents, whether it's for being financially strapped in ways where it's just like, no, you need to be helping with income, or whether it's for simple fact of the kind of hegemonic aspects of parenting that can exist. And so,
You're breaking out the big Ivy League words.
oh Lord Jesus!
I know you have to validate those student loans, but
Right, come on, I can still pay it for real, yeah.
but circle back around for some of us in the audience who may not be hegemonic enough.
Oh goodness. Basically, in terms of you speak a lot about full partnership. A lot of times, parenting can be seen as like, I'm the parent and you're the child.
Right.
And it had been that way for generations. And a lot of times now we're seeing, and I think it might be the, I guess, proliferation or expansion of social media, that people are seeing like, oh, this is what freedom can look like, or this is what career can look like. It can look vastly different. And so I think that we have a lot of those conversations, and I've been blessed to have a lot of those conversations with you, with mom, and even information sharing about this is called this now, and we have boxes for things and all of that. And so I think I have that luxury, and so that's why I was saying I'd love to hear.
For me,
Yeah.
I think this is a good thing for me, I guess, to talk about, because I've experienced a lot. So I went to college when I was 17, came back when I was 22. And the person that I was at 17, a little teenager, compared to the young woman at 22 is very different. And the breaks in between was not enough time with my parents to kind of get us acclimated to who I was becoming. So when I came home from New York, and I'm now living in California full time, I think the concept of I'm the parent, you're the child is what my dad operates off of, and he will not deviate, no matter any kind of discussion to like try and get to like common ground. My mom, on the other hand, she is much more willing to see us as adults now, still her babies, but like you are able to make your own decisions. And that renegotiation that you're talking about, we've been able to do that over the past 2.5 years. My older brother is also at home with us now too, and he's 25, and so granted, there is a caveat with him because he is a man. So, growing
Talk
up,
about that.
I will. I absolutely will.
Yeah.
You know I ain't just letting it slide.
Go ahead, Miss Girl.
So, my parents, born and raised in Nigeria, all of it, like, you know, our family is still, most of them, honestly, 98% is still back there. And very patriarchal society in terms of how they were raised. Like my mom would always talk about how like the freedoms that I have now, being able to just talk back to their parents, not even talk back, just talk to their parents.
Talk back.
To
They
have
didn't
an
have
answer.
that. Right. Whatever I say goes. Like there's just no form or any kind of option to not do what your parents essentially dictate for you. And that's just how it was for decades. And this is the first time that a generation is being able to experience something different than what was the norm, because we are the first of the children, I guess, in the diaspora being born here. And it really is honestly case by case, family by family, in terms of how open your parents are to receiving that like new reality. I have friends who their parents will let them do anything that they want as long as you just tell them beforehand. Some parents don't care. Some parents are like mine, very much so like I'm involved in your life and there's no two ways about it. And that's not to say that I have like any I guess qualms the way that my parents like, you know, operate, yeah. But I just want more wiggle room in terms of how we work. Like my mom, we butted heads a couple times just because I wanted to keep my sense of individuality that I had while I was in school. Like I want to operate on my own schedule. I want to do this, that, and a third, cook when I wanted to, like go outside when I wanted to. But it's like, no, you're at home, so you technically do operate under her rules, but we can work to see where we can work together within the context of where you're living now. And I'm not going to, what's that word, like make you smaller and not, I'm not
Shrink
going
you.
to
Infantilize.
Yes, thank you. Infantilize you, but at the same time, it's like you don't know everything. And I think that was the hardest part for me, to like come from a place where I was essentially like navigating, creating my own like life, and then having to come home and rein it back in. And my brother, his experience is very different because being a boy, being a man, being the one that's essentially going to inherit everything that my dad passes on to him, he can basically do what he wants. Like, yes, my mom still has that rule of, I need to know where my children are, tell me. But if he wants to go to LA on a random Saturday, Mom, I'm going to LA on a random Saturday. And Jennifer, I have to like sign a release form. I have to figure out who's going
Like
there.
asking versus telling. Yeah.
Like, it's just, there's just so much. And it's like, well, Donna's honestly a perfect example because we've known each other since high school, so it's been about, oh my God, like 10 years now. We're getting old. About a decade, which is crazy. I even have like decades under my belt. But she knows her, like she knows Donald, right?
Yeah.
And she's very comfortable with your family, and like she'll still be like, oh, like, well, I don't want Donald driving you to like, it's somewhere in Eastville, like Ralph's, like the regular store. And it's just like, Mom, but like, we're fine. Like, you're just, she's also overly protective and anxious about things that she doesn't necessarily need to. So that definitely does play a part. But like, it's been a constant process of assuring her that I'm gonna be fine. I'm in safe hands. The people that I am with we are birds of a feather. Like, we're not gonna be doing crazy, reckless things. And at the end of the day, like, I'm gonna come back to you. Obviously, God willing. But it's like, I'm not gonna do anything that you wouldn't approve of. I was fine in New York. I should definitely be fine in a 3-mile radius in California. And I'd say my sister has the same experience too, except for we're a little bit different because she has less desires to like flee home, I guess, like
So
to leave the nest.
It fits her personality.
Yes,
Well,
yeah, exactly. So she's fine with like the restraints that she has. I think me getting my license was a pivotal part in my development because like it now enabled me to like do more things and to go out, but it's like I still have restrictions within that freedom. But that was one part where my mom was like, okay, get your license and then you can start going out with your friends because you'll drive yourself there. So I did. And that worked. I mean, I definitely got it later than I should have, but you know, I do have that now. So that's where we're like working to compromise on. And with my dad, you know, still very much so working with him. Conversation isn't really like an option available. It's kind of just like whatever I say goes. And if it doesn't go, then it's going to be like a whole issue. So yeah, just patience, honestly. Patience, praying for
So
strength.
when you say it's going to be a whole issue, what does that look like?
Honestly, it looks like me being yelled at. It looks like just heated arguments because I have gotten to a place where I used to be a little bit more docile, I'd say. Like, I just like, you know, calm myself down because I just was tired of like, you know, constantly being in a argumentative space. But now it's like, well, no, like if I do want you to see me like as my own person and not just like a amalgamation of like just children in the house, I'm gonna speak up for like what I want to say, and I'm obviously very respectful, but it's like even for the fact that I'm going against what he wants, that's seen as an attack, because that's what he grew up with, and I can't really fault him for that.
Yeah, it's fascinating when you say I'm still being respectful. I'm close enough to a generation that you actually opened your mouth. That's the disrespect. Is that you actually,
Yeah. Yeah.
fascinating thing. I'm sitting here now trying to remember the time I asked my dad twice.
Wow.
Never. The no was the no, we ain't doing that, regroup, because we ain't doing that.
Exactly.
Gas up the plants.
We would literally have to sit with strategy about the approach. Because it's like, you better hit your mark, because if you don't hit your mark,
Right.
you talk about Eminem, you got one shot, not miss your chance. And it was like that. And it was just, so as a dad, I'm thinking this is dadness. So when I become a father, I'm shocked you're asking me twice or even doing workarounds. Because that,
It was unheard of. Yeah.
that from my generation was, I won't say it was fatal, but it was physically
Results may vary.
costly.
Results may vary.
No, absolutely.
It was physically costly. And so, for me, and I can really only speak for me, but within my generation, it is more common that respect was, this is your house. When I get a house, then I can have whatever rules, whatever dictate. So it's like, while you're here, this house has rules, but more than that, it has a ruler. And
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
you're not it.
Yeah.
And constantly being reminded of whose name's on the mortgage. And then while we share last names, yours is not on the mortgage. So, so it's interesting as I'm hearing that. And again, I get it. I'm not like, no one should be raised in a dictatorship. But if you are raised in that, that is your normal.
Yeah.
So it's almost like I become a dad, but now I don't get my shot. You know,
Because it's
I lived through this, and now it's my
Yeah.
turn. Why am I listening to all this pep talk? You know,
It's like that whole concept of like, what is power but the ability to oppress? And so it's like you spent all you're like, I did my bit, like I did my time. So you're like, right, exactly. You're like, it's my turn to do this. I think to the point that is being excavated, and I think the theme of the financial relationship or fiscal relationship between parent and child, I think we within our generation are seeing that be problematized more, and we see that long term of like, I'm not going to need you for that long. And so how do you, I guess, not seed resentment during the time of like getting to that place of like, oh, well, when I'm making more, oh, well, when I'm doing more, oh, well, when I'm off in New York, then it's just going to be because you're going to be calling my phone at some point, right? And so how do you kind of stay gracious through those transitions?
well, you stay gracious through the transitions in terms of dialogue, but that's why I said it has to be renegotiated. It's, you can't operate off of the old rules. So for instance, part of that negotiation is freedom versus finance. You're seeking a level of freedom that I'm still financing. So that impinges upon my freedom. Because my generation, once you were out, you were out. It was, nobody was coming back home. It was just not, you failed. That's how that went down. You didn't come home. You were just out there failing and you better fix it. And so when I left home and it was sink or swim.
Yeah.
Now, I got the support from the parents, but it was never in the house. You know, so when my dad would support me and stuff, it was, here, I'm gonna help you run it, but you're gonna have to run it. It wasn't, I'm gonna come home and run it as a subsystem within the system.
I just made partner. Right. We just made partners, so there will be some
Right.
negotiations that need to occur.
That makes
Right,
sense, yeah.
so it's, I'm speaking from a parental standpoint. It's the question of balance. I'm hearing the freedom thing,
Yeah.
but I also know I had my own apartment. I had to pay it. The water had to stay on by me. The power had to stay on by me. And not only that, there's still obligations I have to my parents, even within, hey, can you take me to the store? Hey, can you take me to, I need you to come through, and those types of things. So there was a different, like the driving thing. 15 and a half, I'm trying to get my license. Because I want that same freedom, but I had to get a job and pay for it. It was like, 17, I'm in the military. I'm on my own with life and death stuff. School. My dad, because once I came out of the military and went to nursing school, my dad was like, here are the parameters of staying with me. And you need to run your life. Basically, yeah, I had the freedom, but I had the freedom within a limited context of financial access during that time, and no guidance, it was just basically don't piss me off. And we good. Here's what you have limited in terms of cash, and don't piss me off. So it's a different dynamic in terms of even how we defined adulthood. So hearing like, oh, I want to explore, I want to do this. My dad was very clear because I was like, I don't want to be a nurse. He was like, it's the shortest distance between 2 points. You'll always have a job. And, if you want to go back to school after you're done with this. So you're going to do this program, and that's going to be it. There was no negotiating that. So I did the program. Now, here's the crazy part. He was flat out right. I mean, I was making more money than my peers as a nurse because they pay well, and yeah, he was right. Always have a job. So I'm looking at it from the markers of adulthood, your own place, your own. So when your parents hear, and I'm not speaking for them, but when they hear I'm grown and I need to see you to see me as grown, they're like, okay, so here's 5 things on the list you don't qualify for in terms of how I define grown, like markers. Getting married much later, having a family much later, and especially from the boomer generation. And so these markers that we looked at, the notion that all the kids were home. So any of my siblings who were home as failures. They weren't home still exploring, still growing, still maturing.
Okay.
They were home because they didn't manage grown. So if you're in a generation like that, you're looking and hearing grown being spoken to you.
The context
But
is
you're not
different.
seeing,
I'm hearing a lot of grown, but I'm not seeing a lot of grown.
Yeah, I don't see nothing,
Yeah.
because the opportunity to explore, you had to create. It wasn't something that the parents,
Granted.
Was afforded to you.
it wasn't like I've lived my life to afford you exploration. It was like, I'm gonna get you to a point, then you seek the exploration out of where you are. So as you hear that, talk to me about how that might shape your view of some of it.
I definitely agree with the adulthood markers completely being changed generation to generation. I know that for myself, I made a list that when I was coming back home, I wanted to literally, it's called my adulthood checklist. I wanted to have this, and this off at least by the time I was 22. One of them was getting my license, that was that, and then getting a job, that was that. So I think the financial aspect is definitely a big part of seeing your children as adults, because obviously I'm financing everything that you want to do, but it's that's not what I want you to do. So I want you to use the money wisely, essentially. And And so me getting a job, well, all I'm using that money for now is just to save it so I can actually leave. And that's the third thing on my checklist, to move out. So yeah, it's slow, but it's, you know, there's progress that's being made. I think I've definitely been afforded more opportunities because I can pay for it now. Before it was just like, okay, mom, can I have like 50 here? Can I have 20 here? But it's like, no, like now I actually have enough to pay. But even just like having my own job and having like to budget for myself and realizing, oh, it's like, it's a little expensive. Let me stay at home. I don't need to go to that concert. Right, exactly. And so that too has also been opening my eyes. And then also remembering the fact that like, which just kind of like is a trip, like, okay, your mom was a girl once too, your dad was a boy once too. Like they also had to deal with these like, you know, growing pains, I guess, of like, you know, coming into adulthood, and they also had much more restrictions. And so like having to, I guess, corroborate that in my mind, understand, and like have a little bit more grace for them in terms of like where they're coming from, because my parents would tell stories about what they would want to do as children, and the backlash they get for it is a bit ridiculous. But I mean, that's from me, my perspective. I'm not saying they didn't also do the same thing to me, because I have, you know, I've been through some things, but but definitely not as like harsh as my grandparents were. And then even that too, like when we talk about intergenerational communication, my grandparents are not my parents' parents. Like my grandparents to me, well, may they rest in peace. My grandfather's the only one that's still alive on my mom's side. But like when my grandparents were still alive, like they were just like sweet old people that just love to give me hugs and make food and just like hang out with us. But hearing how like my grandfather, my mom's dad raised his kids like the military. Like, it was crazy. And then my dad's dad also did the same thing. But they were also both in the military, too. So it makes sense. But even just, like, realizing how different the dynamic was. There were more kids. Like, my dad had 6 siblings. My mom had 8. And it's just, like, everything is a lot different from then to now. And, yeah, I understand, like, I guess the caveats when it comes to like, well, you need to pay for what you want to do. You need to make sure you have a house. Like these are adulthood markers that will actually make you into adult. Right now, you're like a grown person in a house that's just doing things, but you're not really doing anything. So, yeah.
I'd be really curious who the onus kind of falls on to even start these conversations. Because even though it should be a dialogue, if we have very different, maybe perspectives, orientations toward doing emotional work, doing what can be like deeply emotional work, then how do you even kind of come to the table around that, I think?
I'll give you what I see as the challenge of that. Growing up in that environment stifles you from doing that work as a parent. So you grow up in that environment and you get grown. And your grownness is achieved through not development, but adjustment. So I didn't develop, I adjusted. No, I can't say that. No, I can't do that. I know I need to do this. So there's no like you guys talk about the exploration and writing, finding yourself. It's more, I put myself in a position not to have consequences.
I see.
That's not growth, that's adjustment. But what you're actually asking for is, how do you grow to a place to have that dialogue? When you've grown up, here's the challenge, but I've grown up in an environment where there's been no practice of adult dialogue. There's just the adult dictates terms. And so getting into that kind of a dialogue becomes difficult because most of it, and especially I can speak from the man's perspective, is your ego was policed from the day you were born. From the day you were born, your ego is policed. Don't cry, don't be a punk, don't. And you know among your peers, don't say this, don't say, oh, don't let it slip, you soft, or any of these type dynamics. So ego-wise, you haven't even processed your ego, which is why stuff feels like a challenge, feels like an attack. Because growing up with your peers, it's been cultivate your manhood. nurture your manhood. And I don't even mean that in a healthy way, but like you better be in the back of your mind, always constantly aware of how you're being seen as a man. Hence the term, I'm a grown A man. That's like the ultimate achievement. Like, how you gonna come at me like that? I'm a grown A man. So I need to stay in possession of that, but I don't realize staying in possession of it is fragile. Means it's fragile. If I have to cultivate it, I have to manage it. So I'm managing all that as a dad, and then I have these kids questioning the rules, the system, me. It gets taken personal in ways that it shouldn't. So before you can start having that conversation, the parent has to reconcile their identity separate from the child. Then we can start having that conversation. Because we're going to need to have that conversation leaving you enough space, please don't take this wrong, but to stumble and say some offensive stuff that you don't even realize is offensive. So I have to have my ego in check, otherwise I'm shutting the system down. So it really takes that level of growth to be able to then look and see. I guarantee you most people hearing the notion that that relationship needs to be renegotiated, it is the first time they're hearing any concept. Because what you guys described earlier, this is my interpretation is, it doesn't need to be renegotiated, it just needs to be won. I just need to win my freedom. We're not renegotiating nothing. I now have leverage and I want to flex
It's a
it.
manumission.
Interesting.
So there's no, like
That's a
you
big
said,
growth.
in the context of a community. So, yeah, you got money to pay for things and you get the things and that feels like adulthood. But you go to the refrigerator, that doesn't feel like adulthood to your parents. You turn the water on, doesn't feel like adulthood to the parents. It's cold, let me turn the heat up. And the parents are looking at like,
That's on me.
I
keep the
put a jacket on,
Come over.
you know,
Yeah.
get a blanket,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of complexity in that because what you're actually requiring is an interruption
Yeah.
from the flow. Because this thing has been flowing systemically from generation to generation to generation to generation. For us to renegotiate means we are changing how this has been done. And we recognize we're moving out of this season into another season.
Exactly.
For the most part, we've been taught to raise our children to leave. This is the first generation where it's normal to come back. So if we're doing it different like that, parents are in the leave mode, you're in the comeback mode, but you want to come back as an adult. How do we do that when none of us have ever seen it, heard of it,
Yeah.
practiced it, and we're cutting edge on this? So to me, again, to answer your question, it requires a lot of ego work, especially on the part of the dad in the household. But then you have, and Morgan, you can speak to this, there's a lot of places where the dads just aren't present. For emotionally there, or just physically there. So how do you have, like, Morgan, you had an actual renegotiation of like, this is what we were, this is what we are now. And I remember you having some of those talks, Dad, look, we gotta talk about this, because this, talk about it.
So I think, I mean, in all honesty, I feel like my situation may have been different. I don't know. Again, God, I think very much took the wheel in that situation, and it could have also been because it was around a lot of health issues that maybe there wasn't as much fight in my dad that there could have been or would have been or what I would have anticipated. But most of the time, when I felt like I got to gear myself up for this is going to be a battle, and he was just like, "That's what you want, baby." Like,
yeah, okay. Let's do. Yeah.
And I'm shocked, you know what I'm saying? They're big decisions, they're big things, and so I've been very blessed that way. Now there are things more now that he's on the other side of that, and he's doing very well.
Got a little bit of a roar,
yeah, a little push on some things. But again, I had to on my own have my come to Jesus moment and say to myself about I cannot will want or force something for especially a parent. So we're talking about kind of like it's a little bit of a switch, and I am kind of doing more of that as we go into older age. Right. But he still is a grown man, a grown man.
Concrete, right. Concrete is hard.
And so I had to I had to decide, like, am I going to spend the time that I have with my dad left like being angry at him because of the decisions he's making, or being at war with him because he is not not going to put down the salt or whatever it is. He's just not going to do it. And be like, you know what? I can remove myself from that part. I'm not going to buy it for you. I'm not going to feed it to you. But if you eat it, I'm just going to, let you enjoy it.
When we sit at the doctor,
exactly.
It's like 180 over whatever. This is what we do.
Exactly. But again, I think I've been blessed. My dad is I always say a tough old bird. He's still hanging in there. Physically, he's doing great. So that's that. But it is that. It's just like, I've been pretty blessed in terms of having those battles. And then when it is much of a battle, then I honestly mostly concede. I still will tell him what I know is right, believe is right, what we need to do. And, he can decide, and some stuff that I have control of, and I just do it. But, it's...
So what I'm hearing, and I can identify with, because I had the same battle with my father, I remember getting the keys to the Corvette. Because he just had money, he would change like the tires on the Corvette, like unnecessarily. So like, Dad, there's 10,000 miles on these tires. You do not need to change the tires on the vet. And so he called me one point and he said, need you to follow me over to the tire place and change the tires. I'm following behind him, and he's in a Corvette. And I think we're doing 20 miles an hour. And I'm watching the brake lights go on and off for like, from my standpoint, no apparent reason.
Right.
And it's drifting, and and I'm watching this, and I'm like, you should not be, like you pass the place, and then, and I hate to say this, but that old person panic, you could see, I've gotten myself in and like the gears locked up in his head. So there's the grief of watching the lion not be the lion.
Absolutely.
The thing you actually hated, you're now seeing as the thing you're now grieving. That fight is gone. So I remember taking him back, going home, and then sitting with my wife, and I'm like, and then everybody in the apartment's like, you got to take the car from me. They're watching. Because he's in a senior, and they're like, he'll need to be driving. And I remember gearing up, like you said, oh man, the vet. You'll have to take the vet.
He's gonna bite me.
And let me tell you what was the hardest part about that conversation was how quick he gave the keys up in the beaks. He said, you really think so? Okay. Well, why don't you just take it? The pink slip's in there, the keys are in there. It was, you know how you like, oh man, I wish I had a vet? Yeah, no.
That's
No. And it's hard. And especially when you realize they're at that stage where they're so vulnerable that Now, there was just no fight in it. He was like, okay, well, here's the pink slip, and here's the keys, here's the this, that, and you know, I just put new tires on it. And I drove that vet home crying. Because it was like, we are at the stage where everything is the last now.
Yeah.
This is the last time you'll drive. This is the last time you'll do this. This is that. And so there's the fight you have with them around the stuff, but then when you see that that's leaving, it's now we're in a whole nother thing. And kind of the point I'm making is what you're feeling now is not permanent. And the evidence of that is your grandparents.
Yeah.
There's a point where the fight just wasn't there anymore. And you're looking and asking, no, not grandpa.
Right, like this is
Right.
Tripping.
He's so sweet.
And it's like, no,
No, so fast.
All right.
yeah, in the day. You know, so it's that kind of transition, and you start to see things, and it just becomes different. Again, I'm back to ego and probably a lot of culture, that we culturally fight transitions instead of embracing them and saying, okay, well, we're just moving into a new phase.
Yeah.
That becomes part of that challenge, because neither one of you are far off from having to dictate terms to your own parents about these are the boundaries, this is what we need to do, and hey, we need to make some decisions about mom and dad. That you will blink, and all that pressure of, you won't give me no freedom. Well, now, here are the choices about me, here are the choices about you.
You can make my life, your life,
Take
their life,
it now.
your siblings.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. That's just so crazy to think about too, because like especially being the oldest daughter, and my mom is also the oldest daughter, and my my grandma was also the oldest daughter, and her mom was also the oldest daughter. As far as I'm aware, yeah, they were just
That's
like
a lot of-
that lineage.
a
There's
lot
just
of
so much pressure. And my mom right now, while my grandma was still alive, she was like her sole caretaker. Even while my grandfather was still here in America, like she did everything. Anything related to doctors, their clothes, what they eat, like it was just all her. Plus she had her 4 kids at home. Plus she had to take care of her husband. Like it was so much work. And she has siblings back home in Nigeria that also expected to like support them too. And now she's just supporting from here for my grandpa that's in Nigeria, and knowing that like that responsibility is gonna fall on me, like the majority of it, as well as with the support of my siblings, but like not really looking forward to it, because like I just don't want to see my parents like, I guess, weaker, after just knowing them to be so strong and like present in my life. Like my mom and her mom were the like most prominent figures in my life. Everything that I've done has been a product of like looking up to them in some fashion. So like thinking of what you're saying about like how like we're getting to that point where as we get older, it's gonna be like the last this, the last that. It's a little disheartening to hear, because like, you know, with getting older and getting that freedom comes the other hand of like, okay, now my parents are just also needing me to take care of them too. Yeah, so it's a double-edged sword. Like,
freedom.
right? Is this the freedom that you wanted? No, girl, I don't think so. But yeah, looking forward to that little like mid space in between where we're both like great, strong, fully functioning adults. Where I can
Still
support
kind of
myself.
old.
Right.
Come visit my apartment.
My apartment. That's one thing too. That I'm looking forward to that, because my mom was always talking about how like she can't wait for me to move out to wherever I want to, and she take flights and come visit us. But she's ready for her kids to leave the nest and just be themselves and support themselves. My little brother, he's the youngest, so we're going to college this August, and so once he's like out the house, like I successfully put everybody through college. I'm done. Y'all do what you have to do. If you need me, I'm here, but like I'm going to travel. Like I'm going to live my life, like, you know, and spend time with my family. And yeah, I support that. I do.
So as you're hearing this, what are you thinking?
I think I never really thought about the novelty of it for everyone in the space. Because I think growing up, it was a lot of, okay, do these markers, go to college, and then I think it was like, do X, Y, Z, and you'll get this. And then I think what the generational disillusionment, I guess, for us is, like, we did the stuff, we went to them schools.
Right.
And it's like, okay, late stage capitalism is capitalizing. And so I think that I hadn't conceived of it being novel for everyone because it's obviously new to us and we came of age in a pandemic and all of that.
Gosh, yeah.
And so we see it as new because we look unprecedented in the face every day. But I don't think that I really saw it as new for the parents also.
Yeah, no parent had really parented it there.
Yeah,
I think there's a level of professionalism that's projected through parenting that you don't expect. Like, oh, well, like you're like, I got the bills. You're like, I got the this. So you're just like, oh, since you like you got all that, and so we feel like we're the novices, and this professional is supposed to now allow me into like the mutuality of the professional space, but. We're all learning, we're all growing.
Yeah.
And I think the more that each of us maybe has a concept of that, I think maybe the freer we'll get. Which I guess we ended up at collectivism, which,
crazy.
right, in the
That's
dang,
why I talk
talking
about negotiation.
Right.
Yeah.
Renegotiate.
Because it is a relationship, it is a partnership. We are partnering through generations.
Yeah.
And that's why I say you have to renegotiate the terms because in every relationship, there are terms you have that are your like rock solids. There's terms they'll have that are their rock solids. There's insecurities and things they need shored up and affirmed. There's things that, so that renegotiation becomes pivotal. I think we don't do enough work of saying where we're going. That we're going to be at this point and then things look like this. And so how are we going to manage it? So it's, my mindset is, really maturity is welcoming you eventually to the council.
Okay.
I say,
You know, so
may
I'm
have to say,
raising
yeah.
you to become part of the council.
Yeah.
speak now.
And as part of the council, you share in all the adult responsibilities.
Yeah.
So the management of the house should not perpetually be our thing while you're out there doing your thing.
Yeah. Right.
It should be, at what point do we share in the running of all this? Some financial, some labor, The one advantage I did have in what I consider was a grossly dysfunctional family, I was the sixth, so I was the youngest. So
Baby gay.
they kind of cleared out.
Yeah.
But in that system, as I'm like from 15, 16, before I left, it felt more shared. Like I knew my mom had these chandeliers with all these crystals. People from my generation know exactly what I'm talking about. Had all these little crystals hanging off of it. But you had to wash those and like soak them in vinegar and then hang 100 or so of them back up individually on the thing. So I knew periodically that was my job. I knew periodically, I knew every Saturday morning I had to wash the car. It just wasn't, nobody was going to no car wash, you know.
Right.
It was get the hose, get out there,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Get the rag.
get the rag, do whatever you gotta do, get the newspaper and clean the window. But it was shared in that context. It wasn't like the parents are here, the children are here, and they're here to explore and grow into themselves. It was more a partnership. And it was like, you're growing into partnering with us. And so my stepfather and I had those like adult conversations. So.
I think it's interesting that you say that because I think my relationship with my mom has kind of, I guess, primed me to fill in those spaces, the gaps of like, I guess, mini adulthoodness within my family dynamic. So honestly, I'm probably gonna say like when I was around 7 was when I became like, I guess, privy to like family issues, grown folks business essentially. And then like obviously on a childhood or child scale, and then as I got older, like people's relationships with each other made more sense in terms of like the interactions based off of what I knew and what I was learning. But as I also just like now, as I am like the oldest daughter, like the responsibilities that I have in the house, like honestly, they're more than what I just even taking care of myself. And so it is really exhausting, which is like, it's very eye-opening in terms of what my parents take care of. But also, me and my sister essentially were tasked with raising my little brother. So like, we would take care of him. They said, we raised you guys, you take care of him. You guys turned out pretty well, I'd say. So you have the baby. And even just like that responsibility alone is a lot in itself. And it also makes me think about like how like, since we're now in our early to almost mid like 20s, when we become parents, like what are we gonna carry over? What is that gonna look like? It's a bit daunting, I'm not gonna lie. But yeah.
I think that would lead into a great conversation about parentified children on a future episode.
Yeah, I think so too. Here's a question that I'm curious, as you talked about, we're responsible for raising our brother. Here's a question I have. Thought-provoking, I hope. When you look at how you and your sister or your other siblings have approached the raising of him, what in your thinking looks like your parents as you look at him? Because there's like your perception of how the parents look at you and care for you and worry about things and think you're slipping.
Yeah.
And
Dang, that's real.
you see what I'm saying?
Yes, and I completely understand you, because even now that he's like 17, I can't comprehend that. Like, you were 4 yesterday. Like, what do you mean? And our gap isn't too large, but it's also not small. I'm 6 years older than him. My older brother is 8 years older than him. But he was a baby for majority of our lives. Like, when I went to college, he was like 12. I came back, he was 16 and taller than me and all this stuff. And now like he's going to college. And even just like helping him through like the application process and him like, practicing to get his license and things like that. I'm just like, are you sure like you can like be yourself, like be like a standalone person that's responsible for your And it's just like, it's so crazy because like I'm seeing what you're saying. Okay, like they're seeing me in that same light. Like, well, you were just crawling, and so I don't know why you think that you can be out in the world
like
and pay for yourself.
Right, be outside all out.
It wasn't giving that.
Right. I'm hearing a lot of growth.
And in my, not my defense, in their defense, in like, I will attest to the fact that like, yeah,
In defense
financially, they are supporting the majority, but I don't pay like house bills. I take care of what Jennifer needs, what Jennifer wants, little trinkets and stuff. But it's nothing like I'm not paying the light bill, I'm not paying anything like that, which is a privilege in my on my part. But when it comes to like raising my little brother, I do definitely still see him as like a little or a younger kid. And he's not a baby. I've given him more, But yeah, it's hard. It is really hard. Like,
but you look and you see like, oh, don't do that.
Yeah.
Come on now.
Yeah.
And you have that like crippling view of like, you ain't ready for this. You don't know this yet. So some of that is just kind of in it. So when you ask, how am I going to be as a parent? You're going to be shocked at how much your parents make sense. As you get older, it's like, okay. Okay, so dude wasn't crazy. I'm starting to see where that came from. His frustration. I'm talking about my stepfather. My fathers, I still don't see because
He did the most.
yeah, he was a different story. But again, my father lived with me and my wife and my first daughter, our oldest daughter. My oldest daughter, in terms of her grandfather, he couldn't have been more sweeter. He actually quit his job to become her babysitter. And then I would try to explain to my wife, I'd tell the stories, and she's like, I don't know.
This is not
that sweet. Not that sweet, my man. You have no idea. I was raised by wolves. But what winds up happening is it isn't just at the fight, but for men, the early part of the years are spent in fear. The latter parts are spent in regret. And so when you get to that regret phase, you actually become more vulnerable in terms of, I regret not being close. I regret not being as invested. I regret not being as connected. And so you start to seek those things at that age because you see the end and you see that a lot of the fighting really wasn't accomplishing nothing. Not of the battling and the protecting of your ego. And you've won nothing. It's like, you're undefeated, there is no championship.
Yeah, yeah.
There's no trophy. You're just undefeated in all these battles towards no win, towards no championship.
Because where do wars begin?
So, you know, so you'll see a difference in that, but that's part of the dynamic. And again, I think one of the big takeaways is being mindful that it's always in a state of transition for everybody. And everybody at that stage is a novice in that stage, as you said earlier.
Well, thank you for that. This has been good.
Yeah,
Love it.
enlightening.
Yay. I feel like I have to clap when the plane
Well,
Snap.
that's our discussion on parenting and adult and generational communication. Hope you were blessed by it. Hope you also enjoy it. Like, subscribe. I'm supposed to say all that stuff. You know,
Say
like,
it.
subscribe, smash
Right to
that
the
like
editor.
button. Yeah.
Okay.
So